Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Scrutiny Committee for Place and Environment. We don't have too many items on the agenda, but they are important, though, in terms of their size and important to the council and to the residents and community where we live. And I know we've got a lot of work ahead of us this evening. So just moving forward, item 1, to note substitutes in accordance with Committee Procedure Rule 8. We have no substitutes. Item 2, to receive apologies for absence. No apologies. Item 3, to receive declarations of interest from members in respect of any matter on the agenda. We have none. So item 4, to agree the minutes of the previous meeting held on 18th of October 2023. Can we just verbally say that we're happy to agree those, please? Agreed. Thank you. Item 5, to consider any items that the chairman agrees to take as urgent business. Can we have none? So item 6, the district plan. Which, as you can see, discussion moving to Regulation 19, pages 7 to 782. So, just if we may, before we move into the main agenda item, it'd be just fair just to talk about how we might manage the meeting to make it work well for our members, for our observers in the room and people watching online, and to make it manageable. So I think we all know that a lot of work has taken us to this point, and we will hear more about the amount of work that has done in terms of the paperwork before us this evening. So we're going to work through the documents in front of us very slowly and carefully, and I want to make sure that everyone has time to find where we are when questions are asked, and as we work through the paperwork. We're going to break it up into discrete chunks, which will be obvious through the headings, and officers will talk to those individual headings, and there will be an opportunity to ask questions on those as we go through. We will be working our way through the main report in front of us, which is from pages 7 to the end of the main report, which is page 26. We're going to use that as a template through which we work our way through the papers. So we're going to be handing over to officers as we go through to take it section by section. But if you have any questions that relate to the appendices and other supporting documents, please can you raise those as they relate to the subject matter within the main report. So we're happy, although we're going through the report as the template, we are looking to take questions on what those related subject matters, even if not in that if they don't relate to that main report. There's no need to rush all your questions and comments. We will be going through the whole report, and all questions and comments will have a chance to be aired. And at the end, I think we should just ask ourselves whether there are any other points that might have been overlooked or have not already been raised. So at the end, we will have an opportunity to raise other questions if you haven't had a chance to do those or you didn't feel it was the right time. So we've got a lot of members here today, and thanks as well to our members who are here as observers. Thanks also to the Cabinet members. On each section, I will go to members of the committee first, and then I will go to observers, if that's okay with everybody. And I'm intending to ask I'm happy to take questions from observers as long as time permits, which I'm sure it will, and be happy to take those comments too. So hopefully that's clear for everyone. So we're going to move forward nice and slowly. And in the first instance, I'm going to hand over to Judy Holmes, Deputy Chief Executive, who will take us through the start of the report.
Thank you, Chairman. As the Chairman has said, plan making is very, very complex and very lengthy. In fact, we started this review process back in 2021. And I think the complexity of plan making is reflected in the documents in front of you this evening. Those of you who are familiar with the process will know that it's extremely prescribed. we have very little discretion as a council in how we bring forward our plan, and indeed we are required to publish certain aspects of our evidence base as part of the process for decision making this evening. So I just want to draw your attention to what you've got in front of you, or what you might have online if you've got it online. The first point I'd like to make is the page numbers that we will be referring to as we go through this are those that are in the PDF version which you had emailed to you, or they're in the full agenda pack if you have downloaded it, or if you have a hard copy version, it's those numbers too, just for orientation purposes. So as the Chair has already said, you've got a report in front of you, and we're proposing to structure the way we present this following the structure of the report to help orientate members through this. And what you should have available to you is not just the report, but you will have Appendix A, which is the plan. So that is the plan, which has been updated since you last saw it at Regulation 18. And those updates are shown in tracked changes. You have Appendix B in front of you, which is the Council's response to the comments that we received during Regulation 18. So you can see what people said, how we reacted, and how that has now translated itself into this plan. You also, at Appendix C, have the Regulation 19 Sustainability Appraisal, which we will reference as we go through. Appendix D, you have an updated Habitats Regulations Assessment. And at Appendix E, you have the Council's Equality Impact Assessment of the plan. And Appendix F, you have the Community Involvement Plan, all of which are referred to in the report and in the recommendations. So the purpose of the report and of our work here today is to ask Scrutiny Committee to recommend the draft Regulation 19 version of the District Plan at Appendix A, the Sustainability Appraisal at Appendix C, the Habitats Regulation at Appendix D, the Equalities Impact Assessment at Appendix E, and the Community Impact Assessment at Appendix F. And your role here today is to recommend these to Council for Regulation 19 consultation, which we are proposing will start subject to Council agreement on the 12th of January until the 23rd of February. The recommendations themselves can be found in the report at paragraph 3, pages 7 to 8. So, as the Chair has already said, we propose to take you through the report section by section, with pauses at appropriate points for you to ask questions on those specific elements that we've covered in that element of the presentation. So the first section is paragraph 4 to 30, pages 8 to 12 of the report. And these sections outline the importance of plan making at paragraphs 4 to 6, and the consequences of not having a plan. And those of you who've been involved in this process a long time will remember when we didn't have a plan, unfortunately, we received 3,000 unplanned homes at a cost of £720,000 of taxpayers' money spent trying to defend the council's position against those proposals. The section also talks about the work that we've done to date. I've already said this is a lengthy and complex process. We started it in 2021 and convened the first set of member working groups, which were selected from the then Scrutiny Committee to oversee the work, and that group indeed met 4 times. We've since convened further member working groups, and we've also carried out additional engagement with towns and parishes supported by ward members to understand their concerns about the proposals. That work is set out at paragraphs 7 to 11 and 21 to 30. We also wanted to reference the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, because this has generated some discussion and debate whilst we've been going through our plan making process. And I think it's really important to make clear that whilst many members of our community have asked for us to pause our plan making whilst the Act was implemented, and whilst it received royal assent, we are still waiting for secondary legislation, and whilst we don't have a firm timetable for that, we believe that is likely to be the end of 2024. The implications of that for this council will mean that we will have a challenge to our housing land supply and unlikely to be able to maintain a 5-year land supply at that position. The other thing that I think is important to note is that as a result of ministerial statement and the expectation around the new MPPF and the Levelling Up Act, that there was an expectation the number would be different to the number that we have to rely upon now. As you know, we have to use the standard method to generate the housing need number. There was a lot of discussion within our communities about that number being reduced by the Levelling Up Bill. We make clear at paragraphs 18 and 19 that that simply is not the case. There is no impact of the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act on how the number is generated. I think at that point, Chair, we can pause for any questions on that particular aspect of the report.
Thank you, Judy. That was very helpful. And you've covered through to paragraph 31 there. What I'd prefer to do, if that's all right with you, is maybe just start with any questions or comments in respect of the opening paragraphs on why prepare a plan and work to date, which is paragraphs 4 to 11. Does anyone have any comments or questions in respect of those? Councillor Peacock.
Thank you, Chairman. This may or may not be the right time to ask the question, but it sets the scene. Obviously, a lot of work has been undertaken since Regulation 18. I was part of the working group and the last working group. You would have had a lot of comments through Regulation 18 and then the working group and from parishes. Obviously, this is a legal document and it needs to be thoroughly reviewed in line with national policy and guidelines. Can I ask you the extent to which our KC, our King's Council, has been involved in helping us draft and, where appropriate, update this version of the district plan compared to Regulation 18 so it is compliant with national policy, etc.? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peacock. Judy, please.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Peacock. That's a really, really good question, and I should have covered that in my introduction. You're quite right that the council has employed a King's Counsel to advise us throughout this process, and indeed has been involved since 2021. And he has checked the documents that we are presenting to you today. He's even reviewed the report that we're presenting to you, and has been involved, as I said, right from the very beginning, including the development of the site selection criteria that we've used to identify the sites.
Thank you, Councillor Peacock. Any other comments on paragraphs 4 to 11? Otherwise, Judy also referred to the implications of the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, which is covered in our report, paragraphs 12 to 20. Has anybody got any questions in respect to paragraphs or comments in respect to paragraphs 12 to 20? Councillor Zyder.
Thank you. You highlight in paragraph 17 that there has been one revision to the MPPF and there is expected to be another, possibly between now and when we actually launch consultation or approve. And whilst that obviously is not expected to have any comment on the standard method or anything relating to numbers, there are other elements which we might wish to be able to take advantage of. How would we be able to manage that within the process if there is an opportunity we would like to take the opportunity of if we are going out on the 12th of January to consultation?
Thank you, Councillor Zyder. Sally Blomfield, Assistant Director of Planning and Sustainable Economy.
Thank you very much. As we've set out in the report, secondary legislation is going to be required to actually bring into effect a lot of the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act. What we do expect at some point, it keeps being promised and we haven't yet seen it, is a revised NPPF, National Planning Policy Framework. Obviously, our plan has to be in general conformity with that, and it depends when it arrives as to when we can reflect any significant changes within it. But there are transitional arrangements as well, and we will take advantage of those transitional provisions. But I think the important point is that a lot of what's sitting in the Act is dependent on secondary legislation, and that will take quite a lot of time to get through the Parliament.
Thank you. I do understand the point on secondary legislation, but the NPPF itself, if there's an amendment put in, is immediately enacted, isn't it? So it's the things that might be immediately enacted that are the ones that would concern.
I think if you have for Sally to continue.
Please.
Yeah, thank you.
It does take immediate effect, but it depends when it comes into force, because obviously we can take it into account possibly up to council, but I don't think it's coming into effect anytime soon. And we can take it into account possibly through modifications through the examination process. So the inspector might be directing, but it depends when it comes out. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sider. I've got no further questions in respect of those paragraphs up to paragraph 20. So if we just extend the final part of Judy's earlier presentation to us in terms of outcomes from Regulation 18, the members' working group and the Town and Parish Council engagement on paragraphs 21 to 31. Does anyone have any comments or questions in respect of those, please? No? Well, I would like to take the opportunity to thank all the members for their assiduousness in the members' working group. I know how hard the councillors involved have worked in terms of sifting through the information put towards them, so thank you very much for that. We're going to move on, and we're going to move on to Andrew Marsh, who is going to present to us on the next sections of the report, namely in respect of transport, sustainable appraisal and habitats, and I think Regulation 19 and the strategy. And if it's all right with you, Andrew, whilst you present on those, we'll then again go through those section by section so that members have a chance to reply. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, as you say, the next section of the report deals with the evidence base, and members will be aware, that's on page 12, starting at paragraph 31. Members will be aware that the full evidence base for the district plan is published on our website, and page 26 of your report has the link to that, so you're able to view that if you haven't already. First of all, regarding the transport work, again, page 12, paragraph 32 onwards, a revised transport document has been placed on the evidence library, which is the Regulation 19 for the Regulation 19 stage. That deals with the sites that are in this version of the plan has been updated since Regulation 18, and paragraphs 32 to 41 set out the detail of that and the findings from that. The other parts that I need to mention to you are the legal requirements in terms of the evidence base that supports the plan. That's the Sustainability Appraisal and Habitats Regulations Assessment. They're discussed on page 14 of your report, 42 to 45. The Sustainability Appraisal is attached in full for your consideration at Appendix C. And Appendix C starts on page 419. And the Habitats Regulations Assessment is at Appendix D, which starts on page 613. And you'll note in your report the broad conclusions of those two pieces of work. In terms of the plan itself, in Appendix A, there is a section in Section 4. You don't need to turn it up now, but there is a section in Section 4 which explains the full evidence base as a summary of the content of it there. In terms of the plan strategy, we start to discuss this on page 14 of your report, paragraph 49. Onwards, that explains that there is a change to the strategy by comparison to our adopted plan and the reasons for doing so. There's more detail on that in the plan itself, Appendix A, in the entirety of section 6, but the summary of it's provided in your report. And that relates to the 4 pillars of the strategy that our site selection process has been through, and the rest of the plan is considered against. And then the last part for this section in terms of the housing number, which again relates back to the strategy as well. As Judy's mentioned already, we've already discussed the position that the standard method is the starting point for our housing need. You'll note on page 15 in paragraph 54 that the housing number has reduced since our Regulation 18 plan was published from 1,119 dwellings per annum to 1090. And the implications of that play out between paragraphs 54 and 56. And that is also referenced in the plan in your Appendix A, policy DPH 164. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, so we started off there with the discussion. Andrew highlighted the transport sections of the report, which was paragraphs 32 to 41. Does anyone have any particular questions or comments they'd like to raise in respect of transport? And as I said earlier, please bear in mind not just the 32 to 41 as they relate to the report, but any wider questions relating to any of the related documents and appendices that are before us this evening. Any questions on the transport element? Okay, we've got no questions on that then. Sorry, Councillor Zider. Sorry.
Thank you. I say this afternoon I had the opportunity to sit down with Andrew and Kate to go through some of the transport strategy, and obviously one of the points that jumps out of this is that somehow magically the number of severely impacted things has changed, and Andrew was able to explain to me why this had occurred and the basis of national policy changes, which was helpful because it's a surprise to some. But also, if I can take a second point with it, because I'm sure he will answer at the same time, he clarified that as it outlines in this in paragraph 40, what we're actually doing at present in terms of this modelling is not as detailed as will eventually be done at the time of planning. And as a result, a lot of other issues, such as managing rep runs, managing the impact on smaller local roads, actually managing safety on roads, will only really get considered at this later stage with far more complex modelling, and that may well have a different impact on the sustainability and severity expected to be on these sites, which may therefore have an impact on whether the housing numbers can actually be achieved on these sites. And I'd just like him to confirm that to other members as well, because it feels like that's obviously a point that we can't manage at this point, but we should be aware of as a vulnerability as to the soundness of the plan and the numbers that we're putting forward.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sider. That's points well made. Andrew Marsh.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Zider. Yes, it was a helpful meeting. I found. I hope you found it helpful too. Just to confirm, in terms of your first point, yes, there are different inputs to the modelling at Regulation 19 stage as a result of advice from our colleagues at the Highways Authority, and that includes looking at things like modal shift and internalisation on the sites and updating our reference case. So that explains that point. The second one about the difference between the plan and an application. This is a national planning policy framework test, I suppose, in that the local plan must have a proportionate evidence base. And a proportionate evidence base is one which supports the plan itself, knowing that more detail will follow at a detailed application stage. And that's perfectly exemplified by the transport work, in that the test for the plan to get through its regulation 19 and then essentially through the examination with the inspector is that at a high level, when considering the district as a whole and considering the high-level strategic transport model that's undertaken at this stage, there are no showstoppers. There's nothing in there that would suggest that the plan should be unsound, and that there is confidence that the sites that are promoted in the plan, in accumulation from a high-level perspective, would be supported or could be mitigated. At a later stage, at the planning application stage, the site promoters will be expected to and required to submit a detailed study looking at just the site and its vicinity, for example, using a different set of modelling, a more detailed set of modelling. And it's at that stage where you would find the details and where any potential issues might arise on the network in detail, but also how you would mitigate those individual impacts. If we're aware of them now, they're in the plan, they're in the infrastructure delivery plan, and they're in the policies that support it. But there is that opportunity at application stage for us to look into that in more detail, and that's perfectly normal. It's just the difference between what you require for a high-level plan and then the detailed application later on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zeidler. Councillor Bates.
In this council before, I've heard the mention of a 15-minute settlement, which impacts on movement and transport, but I don't really see this worked into this document. And likewise, my favourite subject is cycling, and I don't see any real mention of cycle network as being part of this particular programme. So I wondered what our views were on that.
Thank you, Councillor Bates. I'm pretty sure there was quite a lot of discussion on the 20-minute neighbourhoods. So would that be Sally Blomfield?
Gone up, was it?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The whole plan is actually underpinned by 20-minute neighbourhoods concept, and there's reference woven throughout, I think, probably every chapter within the document, but there's specific sections that deal with it because it's so important. And may I come back to the point about active travel when we discuss policies, because we will be looking at the active travel policy as part of the policy section.
Yeah. Is that right, Councillor Bates?
Yeah, thanks for...
Thank you. I don't have any other hands up from the committee at the moment, so I'd like to ask Councillor Marsh, please.
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to speak, even though I'm not on your committee. It's on what you're discussing. It's paragraphs 35 to 35, 37, 39. As Councillor Edwards and myself are ward councillors, it does include Turners Hill. And I am acutely aware it says only one arm of the four is impacted. I assume that is north to south, as they're coming out of the rat run from A22 to 264. How did they come to that modelling, if you don't mind me saying, if anybody goes anywhere near congestion at AM and PM for that they have only decided that only one going from south to north is affected? I know there's no additional housing in that part of the world, but only north in Crawley Down and off towards Copthorne. So I'd just like to know how they came to that modelling, please. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. Judy. Oh, Andrew, sorry. Andrew Marsh, please.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Marsh. Yes, just to confirm that the one arm impacted is east to west. East to west in the reporting. You'll note in the transport modelling paper that's on the evidence library, there's a definition of severe impact. That's the County Council's definition, and that's applied across the whole of the county, of course. and it's related to capacity and queuing. In running the model, we need to be taking account of additional development on top of a baseline. So as you rightly say, it does depend on where the sites are. What the modelling is showing is that when you plug in the sites that are proposed in this plan, the impact of the sites in this plan, tipping the severe impact definition, which is in the paper, comes to the one arm east-west on that junction. And we discuss in 37, paragraph 37, about why that might be occurring and what the remedy to that might be.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. Okay, I see no other hands regarding transport. So if we look at the next sections regarding sustainability appraisal and habitats, paragraphs 42 to 46, do we have any comments or questions in respect of those, please? Okay, I don't have any hands up in respect to those. I'm just giving everyone, I'm sorry if it seems a bit slow, I'm just giving everyone enough time just to make sure they know exactly where they are in the papers, and I can see a lot of people looking very intently at various papers, so I was just making sure. The last section that Andrew Marsh introduced was the regulation 19 and plan strategy and housing need up to paragraphs 56, so paragraphs 47 to 56. Does anybody have any comments or questions in respect of those, please? Okay, I see no questions or comments at this time in respect to those paragraphs. So I'm going to move the meeting on to the next sections, which I think will be addressed from the officer perspective by Sally Blomfield, and we'll discuss the meeting housing need and the various sites that are both in and omitted from the plan. So if I may, I'll hand over to Sally Blomfield. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So Andrew's covered off housing need in terms of numbers, but the next section of the report, which are paragraphs 57 to 77 on pages 16 to 20 of the report, summarise how the draft district plan intends to meet housing need. It's important to understand that we're not proposing to change any of the sites included at the Reg 18 stage. That includes the 3 significant sites and the 21 smaller sites. We're also not intending on adding any additional sites. We have reviewed all the evidence base that was submitted to us in support of either omission sites or sites that weren't originally included, and they were discussed at length by the members' working group. But the sites that were in the Reg 18 draft continue to be in the Reg 19 draft. The details of the sites are covered in Appendix A at sections 14, 15 and 16, and that's pages 165 to 251 of your agenda pack. It's important to note that the allocation policies continue to set out detailed requirements for each of those sites, but in particular the infrastructure requirements. Section 14 of Appendix A also sets out policies to ensure the delivery of the mix of housing, including affordable housing. I think it's notable that there have been many changes to the site allocation policies following careful consideration of comments made and following dialogue with the towns and parishes over the summer period. And you can see those with the track changes. We have been very responsive, and you'll see the extent of change within those allocation policies. I would also like specifically to identify the new general policy on page 191 of the report pack, which sets out guiding principles for sustainable communities, including the fact that development must be progressed in line with a master plan and infrastructure delivery strategy, which will have been agreed by the Council. These are important additions to the plan and reflect comments that we've had. Also important is to note we've included a set of objectives for the growth at Sayers Common, and that's shown on pages 202 and 203 of the report pack. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Sally. Have we got any questions or comments in respect of those paragraphs? Councillor Zeidler.
Yes. It's a question, if I may, about going back to the site selection criteria, which I understand have obviously been in place for some time. It's in understanding one part of the policies in, I think it's in DPC 1, protecting the countryside, which is obviously particularly relevant to this district. One of the points that's highlighted is that development should not take place on agricultural land that is grade 1, 2 or 3. And then there's a little caveat, which is said unless it's demonstrated that it's necessary for significant sites. I understand that at least 2 of the significant sites are on grade 3 agricultural land and therefore would not normally have been considered. But the point I wanted to raise was that in the site selection criteria, there does not appear to be a particular criteria as to whether or not the site is on agricultural land. And I was just wishing to ask officers if the KC is confident that this lack of identification and specific consideration as to whether or not it's on grade 3 agricultural land might be basis for challenge.
Thank you for the question. And Andrew is going to provide you with a response.
Thank you. Yes, the agricultural land is a set of mapping, agricultural land classification mapping. The vast majority of the district is in grade 3. There are small pockets of 1 and 2 in the national park, not in the plan area, and some areas in the north which are grade 4, but the vast majority is grade 3. The position in DPC 1, which will probably come on to in a bit more detail later on, page 118, is that best and most versatile agricultural land, as defined by the NPPF, is grades 1, 2 and 3A. There is no distinction in the mapping between what is of grade 3, which is grade 3A, and what is 3B until you get on site, and it's normally small pockets. It's normally defined by soil quality and other metrics. So as an approach to site selection, it wouldn't be appropriate to use a classification that distinguishes between sites when the whole of the district is essentially in 1, 2 or 3. It wouldn't be a way of deciding whether one site performed better than another. So we are confident that the process used is sound, but obviously if there are elements of a site which are found to be in grade 3A, that can be designed out through master planning, for example, once you get to planning application stage.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zeidler. Councillor Bates, please.
Thank you, Chairman. In Sayers Common, there's been a lot of talk about the new town. Sorry.
Yeah.
All right, sorry. Sayers Common, there's been a lot of talk of a new town settlement in that area in combination with the Horsham district. And I just wondered how close up to a boundary we would be with Sayers Common and what might come the other way. The other question is, if we've got that plan up and running and we were bound to get applications from people outside of those preferred sites, presumably we would refuse them, but could they be overturned by the planning inspectorate?
Back to Andrew Marsh, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bates. Yes, I think what you're referring to at Sayers Common and Horsham is a site that has been promoted in the past in that location, which has been close to, but is not certainly not contiguous or within a reasonable distance of the sites that we're proposing in this plan. That site that was previously promoted to Horsham has been withdrawn at Horsham from consideration. It was not supported in their plan, and therefore it's not on the radar for this plan period.
And the other one was the planning application.
And Sally's going to take that. Sally Bromfield, please. Thank you.
That's absolutely right. Sites that aren't allocated, that then come forward within the open countryside, would be contrary to plan policy, and officers would be recommending refusal to the committee. It would then, if the developer wished, they could obviously appeal, but in light of the fact that we would have an up-to-date development plan, a 5-year housing land supply, we'd have a really strong grounds of our decision being upheld by the inspectorate.
Thank you. Any further questions on these paragraphs, please? Councillor Zeidler, would like to come back.
Thank you. It's on a separate point about allocations, which may be here or somewhere else. In certain sites, obviously the habitats regulation assessment is done on particular areas that are protected, but outside of those areas, where in these significant developments there are, and I have a particular example of badger sets, very active sort of families in an area. I assume that is not considered at this stage on the basis that any such sort of countryside or nature that is on a significant site will either be managed in an appropriate way through the planning application process. Is that correct?
Sally Bromfield, please.
Thank you very much. That is correct. I mean, obviously, our developers and site promoters are looking already at ecological issues on their sites. But as Andrew's already explained, there is a difference between an allocation process and an application process. And the important point is that the evidence base has to be proportionate at this stage. Obviously, anybody who's promoting a site knows that they have to meet the policies within the plan, and key policies within the plan are DPN 1 on biodiversity and DPN 2 on biodiversity net gain, so that they know they will have to meet the requirements of those policies in any event when an application is submitted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I see no other questions in respect to those paragraphs, so I'm going to move the meeting on, and we will consider paragraphs 78 to 84, duty to cooperate, and I will hand back over to Andrew Marsh to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, page 20 of your report sets out our legal duty, the duty to cooperate with our neighbouring authorities and other statutory bodies. What we're showing just above it in paragraph 77 on page 20 is the accumulation, I suppose, of the housing sites in the previous section, what they come to in terms of yield and what that means in terms of our supply. And what it shows is that there is an oversupply for resilience and unmet need of 996 dwellings. And we rehearse in paragraphs 83 and 84 what that means. Firstly, that it's important to have an oversupply as we go through the plan making process for resilience, but also as we set out in paragraph 84 on page 21, that we have considered the unmet need of our neighbouring authorities, and that any provision over and above meeting Mid-Sussex housing need by the time we've been through the entire plan making examination process could be a contribution towards the unmet need arising elsewhere. So that's set out there in between 78 and 84.
Thank you, Andrew. Do we have any questions or comments in respect of duty to cooperate and the unmet need? Councillor Marsh, please.
Thank you for allowing me to speak again, Chairman. I fully understand the need in the over, we've got the 996 over supply. Should we use part of it to meet unmet need, I assume would be in Crawley, would we leave ourselves a bit of a problem with our 5% buffer if we used all of that, 996? That's the question I'd like to know, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you,
I
Councillor.
won't ask a follow-up.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh, and I know Judy Holmes will be providing you with a response.
Yes, I think the oversupply, if you like, has mainly been derived because you'll notice, those eagle-eyed of you will notice that the number has reduced between Regulation 18 and Regulation 19. And from our experience, of course, we will need to go through a public examination to see exactly what the inspector's view is over the plan, the numbers, the sites, and whether or not there is a requirement for a buffer, whether there is a requirement for us to be specific. But I think at this stage, the advice we've been given is that we should plan for meeting our own need, and if there is anything left, that we can then meet the need of others in the housing market area.
Thank you. Councillor Rees, please.
Hello, thank you. I just wanted to ask whether, if we were to meet the unmet need of a neighbouring district, would we get the Section 106 money?
Thank you, Councillor Rees. Judy Holmes will provide a response.
I don't know, I was going to say unfortunately, but maybe fortunately, it's not a science in that respect. So the sites will be in this district and they will be brought forward like any other site. And so, yes, Section 106 would still fall to this council. All that the inspector is saying is that you should aim to meet your own need as much as you possibly can. And if there is anything else there that you're able to do, then that should go to contribute towards meeting the needs in the wider housing market area. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to identify specific sites that you might use to do that with.
Thank you, Councillor Rees. I see no other questions or comments in respect of that section. So we could move on again and look at the policies section within the report. And I'm going to hand over to Sally Blomfield. Thank you.
There are two different types of policy within this document, those that relate to site allocations and those that are more general development management policies that need to be applied, not just to the site allocations, but any application that comes in before us. So the site allocation policies I've largely dealt with in talking about the allocations themselves. There is, however, one other policy that sits within that context, which deals with the provision of allotments at Nightingale Lane. That's a new policy. It's called DP3A. It sits on page 222 and 223 of your report pack. That relates to helping to unlock the Burgess Hill Station site. And as Judy says, those that are eagle-eyed of you will have noticed that the development of the Burgess Hill Station site is now absolutely contingent on the provision of those allotments. And we've spelt out in a policy dedicated to the allotment what we're expecting. In terms of the other broader development management policies, there were originally 58 of these in the Reg 18 version. we've chosen to add a couple more, specifically in response to comments that we've had. And the policies, the most notable of that is one on water neutrality, which is policy DPS 5 on page 86 of the report pack. That follows the same approach taken by the other authorities that are impacted by water neutrality. Crawley is at examination at the moment with the same policy, so that policy is being effectively tested already as we speak. The policies range from those on sustainability, which are page 69 to 93, natural environment and green infrastructure, pages 94 to 116, those on the countryside, 117 to 127, built environment, 128 to 134, transport, and I'll come on to active travel in a minute, page 135 to 144, and the economy, which is town centres and other employment locations, 145 to 160. You can see from Appendix A that there have been a significant number of changes made to all policies following the representations that we've had. We've listened carefully, we have made changes. In terms of significant changes that have been tabled this evening and were circulated yesterday, there is one on DPN 1 on biodiversity, geodiversity and nature recovery. The additional text, since the text circulated with the agenda pack, is highlighted in yellow. And on DPN 1, you can see that we've added further clarity regarding biodiversity features, but particularly on swift boxes. The second policy that was tabled and circulated is DPT 4, parking and electric vehicle charging, and you can see that we have added a reference there to make clear the EV charging point requirements for residential buildings as set out in building regulations. Turning specifically to Councillor Bates' point earlier, DPT 3 on active and sustainable transport has been significantly amended. And this takes into account references to the point that I think he was making in terms of the importance of having a network. And what we've sought to do here is to signpost our developers, remembering that this is a document for developers so that they can understand how to frame their developments. We've signposted them to the important documents that set out the walking and infrastructure network. It's a range of documents that sit with the County Council. County Council's active transport strategy. The County Council has an emerging local cycling, walking infrastructure plan. We also have our own local cycling, walking infrastructure plans for the 3 towns, and they have been approved and submitted to county. And in addition to that, there are a number of routes sitting within either saved policies of the site allocations DPD, and that's specifically the route between Haywards Heath and Burgess Hill. But also there are a number of saved policies within neighbourhood plans which refer to those routes. All of those policies are really important. We don't have to repeat them because they exist in other documents, but what we sought to do is signpost them so that it's clear to everybody. And those references are also included within the policy itself. I think it's important to remember that the site allocation policies also now clearly refer to the importance of active travel, and we highlight the routes that we want developers to include as part of that work.
Thank you very much for that, Sally. And clearly there's a lot of backing documentation behind those paragraphs. Thank you for talking through the amendments as well, tabled in front of us this evening, which we should all have. Does anybody have any questions or comments in respect of the presentation from Sally, the paragraphs in front of us, or any of the supporting documentation, please? I'll go to councillor Henwood in the first instance as a member of the committee.
I'm not too clear, Chairman, if we're going to look at some of the policies, please, because I have a few comments to make on this specific
Please feel free
policies.
to make your comments in respect to those policies. This is a suitable time, yeah.
Oh, this is a suitable time, okay. I'm very, very pleased, very pleased. I'm looking to start at DP sustainability policies, exceedingly pleased that we are now requiring and not expecting these various reducing carbon emissions, et cetera. I'm looking at page 71 in particular, where we're saying will be required and we're deleting expected. I'm really pleased about that. Thank you very much. Makes it a lot more firmer. I'm also confused about how this interchangeable about must. I know it's language, but language is really important. Between must or will be required. Several times it's must and not will be required. I'm looking at that, that's DPS2 where we're using must. And then I'm looking at page 78, prevent overheating. Now, I don't know about this when we talk about reliance on air conditioning systems should be avoided. I would like to be a bit more powerful about that. I mean, I don't think we should be encouraging. I wish the committee would take that on board, whether we should be a bit more definitive about not encouraging air conditioning. And that use of must and DPS3, renewable and low carbon energy, were yet again must. So I'd really like to explanation. That's just the sustainability policies that I have questioned. Oh, and I also have another one about water neutrality, which is a new policy.
Shall we, councillor Henwood, if it's all right with you, we'll come back to you on the water neutrality and we'll just answer those ones as far as it goes to sustainability.
Yes, please, thank you.
To
Thank
date.
you.
Thank you. I think Andrew's going to comment certainly on some of the wording. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Henwood. Yes, in terms of must and will be required, I think we would take the view that must and will be required are both very strong. They're certainly stronger than should or could. So in general, where there's a difference between the two, it's because that's what how the MPPF would describe it. In some cases, the MPPF says must, and in other times it says will be required to. So we're mirroring the language that's used in the MPPF.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, and thank you very much for those changes because we did discuss them in the working party, and thank you, it's a much stronger. Now, water neutrality, I'm looking on page 86, I'm terribly confused by 1, 2, 3, third paragraph down. This means, I hate to read it out, but this means that for every new development, total water usage in the region after the development must be equal to or less than the total water use in the region before the new development. That doesn't make sense to me, you know, where are you going to get the water from? Equal. So I have a question, a huge question about that. And I have another question on page 87. I like the idea about top paragraph, incorporating a range of measures such as grey water recycling. Yes, there doesn't seem to be any obligation to have grey water recycling in this document. I wish that were present because it's pretty important, especially given our present situation. And of course, the question always comes about enforcing, you know, slow water taps and all that kind, which is a huge problem for me, how you enforce that. And then next question on the middle paragraph, next to last sentence, where it says offsetting is expected to be provided prior to occupation of new developments. I think that offsetting should be required prior to the occupation of new developments.
Thank you for those,
thank you.
councillor Henwood. If it's all right with you, I'll go to the offices and Andrew will again provide the response. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, water neutrality, we just need to be quite careful. Water neutrality is very specific to only, if you turn up page 88 of the report pack, water neutrality only refers to a very small sliver of Mid Sussex district. You can see just on the western boundary, so it's the area within the green hatching. Because water neutrality is a very specific issue that's being experienced by our neighbours due to habitats issues in the Arun Valley. So in reality, DPS 5 water neutrality would only apply to that very, very small part of the district in the green. I'm wary of any amendments to that policy because it's exactly the same policy that Crawley and Horsham are using and are being examined at the moment. So that's been written by all three authorities in that respect, and we need to be consistent. But just to clarify the point you had about the overuse, the whole principle of water neutrality is that once you've had a new development, the total amount of water being used in that water resource region, in that green area, would be less than it was previously to that development, or equal to, and that can be obtained by offsetting. So what a developer can do in that area, and I know that it's happening at Crawley, Crawley are using some of their own housing stock, for example, and putting in some restrictions in terms of that housing to reduce water consumption from their stock, and therefore that's freeing up water that was previously used by that stock to be used on the new development. So in terms of additional water, same amount of water is being used, even though you've got more development. It's offsetting. There are other sort of economical measures that can be used in that region up until the point, essentially, that a new water resource is found. And again, as the policy rehearses, really, that must be done after the development that you've put forward yourself in that area is as water efficient as possible, such as meeting the 85 litres per person per day limit. But in reality, for caution, that policy, once again, is just for that little green area of Mid-Sussex.
Okay, is it very, very clear? I know it discusses a small part, but I mean, I understand it's not terribly clear. It is now that you've said someplace they will retrofit their old stock, their old houses with slow taps. Okay, but it's not terribly clear, and I think even though you might have copied it from somewhere else, I think it would help with a bit of clarity, perhaps inserting that's what you do. You retrofit all your old houses. Now, you haven't explained why we have nothing to do. Is there another policy within here that I've missed that talks about grey water, which we should be, sort of in supporting, making it sort of will require? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Councillor Henwood, and I think both Judy and Sally are going to respond to those comments. So I'm going to go to Judy Holmes in the first instance.
Okay. I just wanted to pick up the point you're making about copying the policy. We haven't copied the policy. We are working really closely with our neighbours over this really important issue of water neutrality. And the point that Andrew was making there was that the three authorities impacted, albeit we're only impacted by a very, very small amount, have agreed that we will take a consistent approach to how we deal with developers and how we address water neutrality. And the point Andrew was making was that Crawley are currently in examination at the moment. So clearly, once the inspector has opined over that their policy in the plan, if there are any good practice changes that we can make and take from that, then we would introduce that as part of our examination. And indeed, I'm sure Horsham will do the same. So I think it's a really important point, and I think Sally wants to come back on is there another policy in the plan? And the answer to that is yes, and Sally will take you to that.
Thank you very much. You alluded before to DPS2, Sustainable Design and Construction, and clearly an important point of sustainable design and construction is water resource and water efficiency. So you'll see on page 78 and 79, there is a section of that policy, so a policy requirement, which covers that issue, including the section about the types of measures that could be introduced to reduce water use and reuse water, including water efficiency fittings, rainwater harvesting, and so on. So it's expressly set out in a policy, and remembering that this policy applies to all development, whereas the policy that Andrew was referring to only applies to that really small sliver of the district where we're impacted by the water neutrality issue.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. Just, we're on that page 78. I did actually mention the air conditioning, about whether or not that should be, you're just saying should be avoided. Can we say that, you know, whatever, a bit more stronger?
Thank you. Sally, I know you'll be able to comment, please.
Thank you very much. There are some things that we have to be slightly more flexible than you might want us to be. And this is one of them, I'm afraid, because we can't be prescriptive about air conditioning and cooling. We have to give some flexibility for development. However, what's important in the DPS2 policy is the external accreditation system that we're proposing, which will look at the scheme as a whole and then come up with an accreditation. So it will take that into account when it comes up with a score for the scheme.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Hitchcock, please.
Thank you, Chairman. We're in the same sort of area. I'm looking at DPN4, which is trees, woodlands and hedgerows, and I'm looking in particular at page 108, which has got a little subtitle on it called Use of Buffer Zones. And we're talking here about buffer zones around ancient woodland and specimen trees. In the paragraph which is talking about development at the top, there is an option to look at using a 15-metre buffer zone or a 15 times diameter zone. And that's something which quite often in site surveys is forgotten. And it's always an issue because the large trees almost always need a much larger buffer zone, and it tends to get forgotten. It needs to be expressed a bit more clearly, I think. The other thing that I looked at was the issue of taking out the could, would, should. We have in the paragraph which is relating to buffer zones and what they should not contain, we have a would in there. Can we take it out and put in a will not contain? Because we don't want roads, pavements or private space in buffer zones. And I think those definitions should also include any managed constructed facility on the site, which would include things like sediment basins, filter strips, swales, polishing areas. They shouldn't be in buffer zones. Buffer zones there to be a buffer. So I think we ought to tighten that one up a little bit, please, if we could. Also on the same page at the top is we're talking about cutting down mature trees as part of a process and re-establishing them by replacement and replanting. There's a comment in there which says they would normally be required to be replaced. Can we tighten that one up and say they must be or will be?
You're okay with that,
Thank you.
Councillor Hitchcock, and we will get officer response. And Andrew's going to start with the response. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. Just in terms of the use of buffer zones and that section there, the distances in there are specified by Natural England standing advice. So we are sort of obliged to do as they tell us in that respect. So it's mirroring the advice from them.
Can I come back on that? But it needs to be enforced.
Yes, and having a policy gives us that enforcement, because when an application comes in, we'll be determining it against that policy. And those sorts of things can be conditioned as well.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Hitchcock, you're happy with the responses to both those questions that you had?
Well, I think that they have to be looked at before
Yeah.
giving a response.
Fine.
Some issues.
Okay.
Some issues.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I wasn't sure, so I just wasn't sure if another officer wanted to comment, that was all.
Okay, so just to clarify, were the officers able to answer all the questions that you raised, or are you looking for further information about the should and the musts?
I think all I'm asking is that we have continuity throughout the whole process of the plan. We either need to be taking the coulds, woulds and shoulds out and putting in the will and musts, because I don't think there are any issues where we need to be flexible on that.
Yeah, I'm just clarifying. I think just to reiterate the point that officers have already made is that we are mirroring the language that is used in the MPPF or in guidance that we must have reference to. So we're not able to change those. It's not at our discretion. These are things that we're legally obliged to refer to.
Thank you for that.
And will you please consider the additional items that I suggested you put in as being will nots in buffer zones?
Can I just clarify exactly what those additional items are? The officers were wondering where you were actually making those references, and I think if they refer to policies, which are the green, those areas shaded in green, then we will be mirroring the language that we're required to use in the MPPF.
Yeah, but this policy is about tree and hedgerow and tree management, isn't it? What you can and can't do when you're constructing things. And buffer zones are specifically required to contain no construction. And they generally do. They normally have swales in them. They normally have silt pits and all the rest of it. That shouldn't be in a buffer zone. It's not good for the tree system.
Sally, please.
Page 108.
I understand your point, and you'll be aware that we've considered a number of planning applications where there have been exceptional circumstances, where there has been some marginal infrastructure within a buffer zone, but they are taken on a case-by-case basis, and we've looked at the exceptional circumstances. And I think I would want us to continue to be able to do that. I mean, we could put something potentially within the supporting text which would indicate the approach that we'll take, but I think we need to actually have that ability to look at applications on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for raising that, Councillor Hitchcock. I got Councillor Eaves first and then Councillor Marsh, please, from outside of the committee members.
Thank you for giving me the chair, Chairman. I'm referring to the update which everyone has in hard copy, and I'd like to thank the senior management for working with us on this to try and get the Swift bricks included. Aware that biodiversity net gain doesn't apply to the actual building as a habitat, and we've been helped by the wording from Wandsworth Council, who have already got this past the inspector and it's been adopted. I thought everything was okay, but I realise now there's a bit of repetition has crept in, and I'm sure officers will sort that out. But looking at the footnote on page 4, which is page 97 in the pack, if we could delete that first yellow sentence, because that's elsewhere already, and if we could replace that sentence, because if you take it out entirely, it doesn't really make sense anymore, replace it with another sentence from the Wandsworth paragraph, which would read, regarding urban birds, Swift bricks integrated into new buildings are preferred,
as these are suitable for multiple bird species. The reason why we want the bricks to be integrated is if you have boxes, they can be removed or they can be more subject to temperature changes. So I'm happy to give that sentence to the officers if they feel they can take that on board. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Judy Holmes, I think, in the first instance. Thank you, Councillor Reeves.
I think we can consider your proposal. If you would let us have that in writing, then we can consider that, given that it is a footnote to the supporting text, to the policy.
Is that okay, Councillor Reeves?
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marsh, please.
Thank you, Chairman, for again allowing me to come in. It is again on page 4, and it's the yellow bit, which I don't, I fully appreciate what's in there, and I support what Councillor Eves has just said as well. It's when an application comes in, we do know that the developer has to do environmental impact assessment to see what's actually on the land and stuff. Developers will then, if they find evidence of, say, bats, or in this case, dormice, which seems to be omitted, they will put up boxes. But the problem is that once the development has been built or said will come to the end of it, they go and remove a load of this stuff off their site. And in my old ward, up in Pease Pottage, the developer kept them in. And obviously I can't make any amendment because I'm not part of your committee, but could the officers take on board that, they add to dormice? I only say this because I've been at the National Park today and that did come up.
Okay.
And that's because they are probably one of the most declining creatures we have in the country. So if the officers could add that to it, that once they put their EIA in, that they actually keep the boxes in place afterwards, because they need help, as everything else on this list does. That's down to the officers. If they wish to do it, then fine. But thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh.
Yes.
Are we happy to leave that with officers to consider?
Yes, we're happy to.
Thank you.
To
And I note in the recommendations, if we get, as and when we get that far, there is the ability, I think, to sort of consult with the portfolio holder leader to make any sort of relevant changes in light of these discussions and the facts of the circumstance. So if we can leave that with yourselves, that'd be great. Thank you. Councillor Henwood, please.
Is it appropriate to talk about the policies to do with infrastructure?
We are just about to come on to infrastructure as the next section. So is it all right if we just come back to that, Councillor Henwood, in case anyone else has got any of the other policies, and then we can come back to those questions? Thank you. Any other questions on the matters described by Sally in her previous presentation? No? Okay, in which case, Sally, it's back to you, I think, when you're ready, just in terms of infrastructure, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Did you see the shuffling of papers
Yeah,
there?
yeah.
Thank you. We're all struggling a bit with papers. Just on the point that was made about appropriate long-term management arrangements for Councillor Marsh. Just to point you to the policy wording on page 4, where it refers to not just incorporate biodiversity features, but also include appropriate long-term management arrangements where relevant. So hopefully that gives you some comfort. Once they're introduced, we expect them to be maintained, well, retained and maintained. Is that okay? Good. Okay, so turning to infrastructure. You as an authority have always made clear that development must be supported by the appropriate infrastructure. And as a result, you wouldn't be surprised to see the range of policies in the plan at Appendix A, Section 17, page 252 and 268. So a whole range of policies on how we will, what and how we'll expect infrastructure to be delivered. This is in addition to the site allocation policies of the plan, which absolutely make clear the infrastructure requirements from each allocation, both on-site and off-site. And I think that's a really helpful addition to this version of the district plan, because it makes clear to the development industry exactly what we're expecting to be delivered. Paragraph 94 to 96, page 23 of the report, also reminds members about the preparation of the infrastructure delivery plan. That's another document which at 90 odd pages you can find on the website. This is the updated version that accompanies this plan, the November 2023 version. This clearly sets out the types of on and off-site infrastructure required in order to support the Regulation 19 plan, and it's being produced following consultation with infrastructure providers, but also towns and parish councils following the summer meetings that we've had. So there's a lot about infrastructure, not only woven through the document, but also sitting within the infrastructure delivery plan, which I hope members find useful.
Thank you, Sally. Does anyone have any comments or questions in respect of those paragraphs and supporting documentation? Councillor Henwood, please.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. I'm looking at DP 112, planning obligations, on page 2, whatever it is, 256. I wondered why under B, when you talk about provision of open spaces and leisure, why you haven't put down allotments? Do you where I found provision of page 256? DP interest 2, planning obligations. Planning obligations. Pardon?
Sorry, Councillor Henwood, I'm on page 256 as well. Which little number, you're just saying it's just the absence of allotments?
B,
is that-
if you look at the top, DP 1, planning
Yeah.
obligations, under B, it says, and then B1, provision of.
Okay, yeah.
And I wondered why we haven't included in that space and leisure green infrastructure, why we haven't put allotments down. That's a first question.
Can we just deal with that now, as I think Andrew
Yeah.
Marsh is ready to answer?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Henwood. If you turn to page 260, which is our policy DPI 5, open space, sport and recreational facilities, you'll see that the facilities referred to in this policy include allotments. So therefore allotments would fit under the open space and leisure B little I.
But Andrew, the problem is on my DP 15, the provision of, you've crossed out on my copy, including allotments. It's been crossed out on my copy.
Yeah, that's essentially because it's listed in the bullet points above. We didn't need to be as specific as that because the whole policy refers to everything that are in the bullet points at the top of page 260.
See, I have a problem with that because I think it's absolutely essential to be in a policy, because when we consider any planning application, we, in the town council say this is against policy such and such. We don't preamble it, and therefore I don't quite understand why it was removed.
I think Sally's going to address that now.
Thank you.
Green infrastructure, if you turn back to page 101 and policy DPN 3, green and blue infrastructure, green and blue infrastructure are defined, the list of examples are defined, and allotments included within that. So effectively, the point at B1, where it's talking about provision of, and then it lists green infrastructure, would incorporate allotments, because the green infrastructure definition is a very broad-based definition, which, as I say, is defined on page 101, and specifically on page 102 under other. If you can find page 102 under other, it talks about street trees, allotments, community gardens, orchards, so on and so forth. So the definition is captured.
But that doesn't quite explain why it was removed, because it just gives a bit more weight and influence on DP 15 open space sport and recreational facilities. It doesn't explain really. It might be found elsewhere if you read the print, but this is an actual policy, and it was scratched out.
Councillor Hammer, could we perhaps leave that one for the leader to pick up, or the portfolio holder to pick up in the discussions, perhaps to see whether it...
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think, were you going to raise another point, Councillor Hemwood? On infrastructure, it was just, okay. Fine. Councillor Zeidler.
Yes, I'd like to thank officers, well, not only in this, but in all areas for the advances that have been made since Reg 18 on all the policies, and indeed on the whole of this plan, which I think is excellent. Infrastructure is a critical area and one of great concern, and within DPI 1, it's also very gratifying to see that it's explicitly recognised as far as we can make it within policy, whilst still being proportionate, that impact on residents is being considered explicitly. Again, that's incredibly encouraging. The point that has been discussed at great length is obviously the fact that this council doesn't have a lot of control over external infrastructure providers. It's clear and set out in the preamble to DPI 1 that any on-site development, the developer will be a delivery partner and will sign legal obligations and agreements which provide us the opportunity for sanction if there's a failure to deliver. The real challenge is there's no route for sanction for off-site delivery from statutory partners, and I just wish to ask, clearly the only thing that appears to be possibly an application to a regulator if a statutory provider says it's going to do something and doesn't. And just to ask officers to confirm that there is nothing else that they can possibly include which might provide some route forward.
Thank you for that, Councillor Zeidler. I'm going to pass to Judy Holmes in the first instance.
I think we're satisfied that we have a robust plan and that we have done our utmost to ensure that we hold both the developers and the infrastructure providers to account through the policies in the plan, policies supporting site allocations and the IDP, the infrastructure delivery plan.
Is that the assurance? Hopefully that's the assurance you were looking for, Councillor Zeidler, as far as we're able to provide it. Any other comments or questions in respect of infrastructure? No? Okay, so we are making very good progress through this report. The next sections are just regarding conclusions, next steps. So I am going to propose that Judy Holmes talks us through those, but once we've talked through those, I would like just to come back just to the committee just to make sure there are no other comments or questions that members might wish to raise before we look at the recommendations. And once the committee has raised its comments and questions, I will then also ask the portfolio holder if they've got any comments or questions that they wish to, or comments that they wish to make in respect of the report. So, Judy, if I can go to you just in terms of conclusions and next steps, please.
Yeah, so turning back to the report itself, we outline there the next steps. They're at paragraph 101 to 106, pages 24 to 25 of the report. I'd also in this section draw your attention to the community involvement plan at Appendix F. You'll be aware that this committee will be asked to recommend to Council, and the Council is the decision maker in respect to approving the plan for Regulation 19 consultation. And subject to this committee agreeing, it would be considered at the next meeting of the Council, which would be the 13th of December. Subject to that, we're planning to commence the Regulation 19 consultation on the 12th of January for 6 weeks, which will conclude on the 23rd of February. You'll see that in both the report at paragraph 102 and in the community involvement plan that the Regulation 19 consultation is a prescribed consultation. It is a consultation that we're running on behalf of the inspectorate, the planning inspectorate that is, and you can find guidance on how you can make your Regulation 19 comments and representations in the link which is included in the community involvement plan, which is at Appendix F, as I've already said. So the Council's overall approach to consultation is outlined in the Statement of Community Involvement, which you can find on the Council's website. We propose to publicise the consultation, and that's also set out in paragraph 105 and in the community involvement plan. Following all of that and subject to council approval, then the plan will be submitted to the planning inspectorate following the regulation consultation, together with all of the representations and comments received. After that, we are in the hands of the planning inspectorate in terms of the timeline. The planning inspectorate will then inform us when the examination can take place. Following an examination, and should we be successful in the examination, the ultimate decision maker on adopting the plan will be the council. So it will come back to the council at some later point. So those are the next steps. In terms of just wrapping up the conversations, the discussion from this evening, Chair, if I can just make sure that we are clear on what officers have agreed to do, subject to the committee, is that we will receive some further written comments from Councillor Eaves in respect to DPN 1 and the footnote in particular, to tidy up the text to make it, to avoid duplication. We've also had comments about the allotments, and officers are willing to consider those comments in relation to the allotments from Councillor Henwood, I think we are minded to reinsert reference to allotments where it were deleted. And then I think there were some final points around DPN 4, which I don't know, Sally, did you want to just confirm and clarify what action we're going to take in respect to those? That's okay, Chair.
Thank you, Judy. Sally, please.
We're minded to include some additional wording and supporting text about looking at buffers and infrastructure within buffers on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you. That seems to have the approval of the councillors involved, so thank you very much for that. Does anyone have any comments in respect of the next steps or questions in respect to those as just set out by Judy, please? Councillor Henwood.
No, I just wanted to thank the officers very much, and particularly for replacing expect and should with must and will be required in the policies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Henwood. Councillor Avery.
Hi, I'd just like to reinforce what everybody else has said. I think it's a fantastic piece of work, and the fact that the 12 of us, or how many people have spent the last week and a half, or in fact 6 months probably, mulling over every single word, and we've come up with about 4 words that we want to change, is a compliment to everybody working on it, really. I think it's a really strong plan, and I think it's good.
Thank you, Councillor Avery. And the 11 of us on this committee are, I think, share much of that sentiment. Any other comments or questions that people had that they feel they haven't had the opportunity to raise as we've gone through the report, but would be uncomfortable leaving the meeting if they hadn't raised them? No? Well, thank you very much for the input in the debate. Before we go to recommendations, I will ask the portfolio holder if he has any comments or observations he'd like to make. So, Councillor Eggleston, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairman, for allowing me to speak, and thank you for the way that you've handled what is a an incredibly weighty topic and given everybody the opportunity to go into some of the detail. Very much appreciated. I want to start really by giving some thanks, because however many hundreds of pages, and actually when you add all of the supporting evidence, it runs to thousands of pages of work, and you know, we really do owe a debt of gratitude to our officers for the diligence that they've applied to what is, as I've discovered, an incredibly stressful activity, and they've done it with good humour, and I think I'm right, and I hope everybody will share this view. I think I'm right in saying that through this process, you know, particularly from Regulation 18 onwards, we've demonstrated as a council collectively, officers and members, and indeed towns and parish councils, we've demonstrated that we can work collaboratively on what is a very difficult set of decisions that we have to make as a council. Plan making, as I've discovered, is not easy, and it's not free of risk either. And what we come out of this process at the end is not a perfect plan. We will never see perfection in this world, but it is a good plan. And you know, there's a saying which says that, you know, a flawed diamond is better than a pebble without any flaws. And this is what we have here. And we have it here because of the effort that we've all put in to this process. And, you know, I came equipped to answer various points that members raised, thinking that they wouldn't be covered. And actually, I do believe that they've been covered. And I think now, for you as a scrutiny committee, you know, this is the next stage of our journey here. And I hope when you come to vote in a few minutes that you take us further on down this road, because I do believe that as a council we are putting ourselves in a very good place, not just in terms of providing the right sort of homes that people need in the district, but also doing it, as we've demonstrated in a lot of this debate, doing it in a way which does protect our landscapes, does protect nature, does increase biodiversity. And you know what? I think we can be proud of ourselves for rising to that challenge and meeting it. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Councillor Eggleston, for your comments. And on behalf of the committee, I'd like to echo your thanks as well to all the officers. I know a lot of them are here this evening, but there's a lot that aren't. We really do appreciate the amount of work that's gone into that. So thank you very much on behalf of the committee. So if we move to the recommendations in front of us, they're set out on pages 7 and 8 of the report. I won't read them all in full, but it's paragraph 3, and there are 5 recommendations, points 1 to 5, which I would propose that we take en bloc, and noting as well the comments that Judy Holmes has already said in terms of actions that officers will take following this meeting. So it's basically for people listening online to push this through to council, and they are well set out, but I think it's not very easy to summarise it, so I think we'll just leave it as set out and recommendations for paragraphs 3, 1 to 5. So could we take those on block and vote using our electronic buttons, please? Thank you. Great. Well, I'm very pleased to say that that vote is passed unanimously. So the plan will indeed move forward to the next steps as envisaged earlier in our debate. So thank you very much, everyone on this committee, for their hard work in scrutinising the report and all the work and actions that they've taken to get us to this meeting this evening too. Item 7, questions pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 10.2, due notice which has been given. I have none. And so that concludes the meeting at 8:39. And thanks everyone and all observing members and members of the public for attending this evening. Thank you.